Going live in three, two, one. I wish there was an exciting countdown like that. But for the best I can tell, we are live. So hello and welcome, friends, to our Power On show. This is for the successful Power BI professional. So if you are one, I want to get there. You want to keep listening. So today we have Charles and me, and we have a special topic. We're gonna basically talk about our life of a Power BI pro, and we're not gonna pull any punches. We're gonna, reveal some stuff under the covers. We're here to talk about it, answer your questions, and the theme we're going with is good, bad, the good, the bad, and ugly. Well, and so we thought about this quite a bit. We've been back and forth a bit, and talked about how we want to cover it. So the best I could figure, and you can help me, kind of explore that more, is the good we put in as flexibility that we get in our lives. So we want to talk about that, and the bad, variable income. I know I've heard that from some others. Like, how do you deal with that? And I know that was a switch for both of us who come from full time, the FTE employee background, the full time employee, and the ugly. This I hear often as well, which is like, oh, but I'm not good at selling. I don't want to sell. I just want to do Power BI. So we'll talk about all of that, answer your questions. So hello and welcome everybody. And I got a hello from Frank, Robin, who's on the phone. We have a couple of our Learn Power BI members on the phone as well. So yeah, Mark, Robin, Shanda, Steve, good to have you on. On YouTube, we have Frank, we have Amar, we have Nanda. Anybody else joining in, do put in a hello and let us know where you're watching us from. We always love hearing that, and we have members from all over the world, so that's always exciting. Um, all right, so yeah, we'll kick it off. So, life of Power BI Pro. Charles, let's talk about gosh flexibility. You gotta love that. So
Oh,
why does that what does that mean? How does that look like in your life?
I think the best story is yesterday. So I was sitting there. I think I started the morning doing two data model projects. I did some star schema, some lookup stuff, integrating a new file, and then by around noontime, I was like, well, I got a Rotary meeting coming up, and I got to jump on the Zoom call, or my son and I haven't been out canoeing on the lake in a couple weeks. What am I going to do? I was like, I'm going to do that. So we went out, we ran out. I emailed Rotary. I was like, hey, Rotary, I'm going out canoeing with my son. We're going to
Yeah,
do this. And to have that just freedom to do whatever with your time, it gets a little getting used to because before, my life was kind of dictated. Here's the task, here's the projects. But now I've gotten used to this flexibility where I can be
yeah,
like, hey, I'm going to go. And, it was so awesome. This is a story I want to tell the audience too, because we have a little ritual at dinner where we
hmm,
go around the table and we're like, hey, what made you really happy today? And all my boys,
wow,
pick one event. And my son was like, I was really happy about going on a canoe with dad today. And
yeah,
he told the whole family that. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, so flexibility, you can work on work or you can decide I want to
yeah,
do something like hike. Like I think you hike, right?
yeah,
Um, so
yeah,
so yeah, that's my story of how flexibility works for me is it's powerful. Like when you get
yeah,
that moment where your son says, what really made me happy today was I got to hang out with you, Dad. I was like,
yeah,
well, that's pretty cool.
yeah. Man, that's great. Hey, does something come to mind of like a counter story of when you did not have that flexibility? How did that feel like? I mean, I have tons of those.
Yeah. Oh, um, I remember those days in the corporate world where the dreaded email comes in, and I have a project in particular, or you sit in a meeting and you've got this huge, and this was a BI project,
Yeah,
and it was supposed to be like over a year, and we were going to combine like five different databases, and we were told you have 2 weeks starting today, get it done, and then the rest of the day you're just like in sweats because you're scrambling and trying to figure out this new compressed deadline. There wasn't any negotiation. You were just told to just go, and you were already late, and you're like, how are we going to squeeze two, and you're
yeah,
just thinking in your head, all these fears come in. You're like, this is a train wreck, this is a train wreck, this is a train wreck, but
yeah,
um And you had no choice, right? So I think back to those situations whenever I have these, situations like this where I'm like, man, I'm kind of stressed. This is a project, but I own my own time, and I do this every day. And I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's time for a run, and I take a run around the block, and it's through the trees, and you get to be with nature. So those are the stories, and that's the counter story too.
Yeah, yeah, boy. Yeah, I mean, it's there was a time when I had joined Microsoft and I was coming after a layoff, and I didn't know that that's how I was processing it, but in my mind, subconsciously, it was like, I never want to go through that again. I'm going to work so hard, I'm going to make myself indispensable. Now, anybody who has been anywhere close to a layoff knows that it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, no matter how hard you work, you can never make yourself indispensable, not in this day and age, in this economy, right? So, but that's what I was doing, not realizing that that's what I'm doing. And um, there was a there was a weekend where my wife asked me for something to be around the family, to do something with the family. Maybe it was even my son's birthday. I don't know. It was something. It was big enough. And she said, "Hey, can you would you be there for us? And would you be around?" And I said, "I really can't. Just give me this weekend, right? I mean, just give me this weekend." And she said, "Well, Avi, I mean, you've taken a whole year." So I didn't realize. I mean, I started and I had this mindset. Yeah, I'm gonna work hard, and you're always thinking like, I'm gonna work hard for a little bit, right? I mean, for like whatever your timeline is, for a week, for a month, for a year. I was like, yeah, just this weekend, right, or whatever. And I hadn't realized that it had been a year. And the funny thing is, even after the incident, man, it took me 2 more years to wake up. I kind of kept slogging and slogging for like 3 years before I finally switched teams in Microsoft, and whew, that was a change. But yeah, flexibility is good. I've been thinking
I have
about.
a
Yeah.
I have just that reminded me. I had an exact same situation like you. I was sitting in an overnight Cub Scout overnight, and the kids were going with their dads, and they're sitting in this cabin, and we were gonna pitch our tents. But instead of enjoying the festivities and the dinner that everybody had cooked, I remember I was on my phone, and I was like, "Oh, this project is so
Oh,
important. I gotta,"
yeah.
and I think back now, I was like, man, I should have been with family. I should have enjoyed the moment with my son, but here I was on my phone, like worried
Yeah.
about this project. But
Yeah.
now I can take a project and be like, I don't have to do this immediately, so I'm going to push it off to tomorrow, or I'm going to a lot of time. But right now, I have to be present with family, with my son,
Yeah.
and you can pick and choose or with your own time. Whereas before, like this project needs to get done now, and
Yeah.
even though I'm at a Cub Scout event, I need to get this done now. So sorry, I wanted to get that
Yeah.
story out there because I
No,
think that
that's
happens to a lot of us.
yeah, that's true. And so one thing I wanted to kind of clarify from the get go is that folks, we're not really talking about like employee versus consultant, right? It's not about that. If you hear what we're talking about, it's kind of beyond that. And I know many a consultants, right? Many a freelancers who don't have this life. And and what I've been taught by my coaches, like, you're responsible for the life you create, right? So yeah, if you're not conscious, if you're not aware, if you take your eye off the goal, you can end up, doesn't matter, right? Employee consultant, you can end up with, yeah, where you're, right, I mean, tied to your work all the time. And I remember there was one gentleman very respected in the Power BI industry, and he gave up his kind of freelancing role. May even have been a Microsoft MVP, but he gave that up and went back and got a job. And like, I asked him, like, "Hey, what happened?" And he said, "Oh, I got tired of the long hours and constant travel." And I didn't say that to them, but I'm like, dude, then why are we doing it, right? I mean, you can kind of choose not to. So it's not like, oh, you become a consultant, freelancer, or whatever, solopreneur, and now everything is great. Well, you got to choose. That's great. So flexibility got can be a double-edged sword too, though, right? I wonder if you have struggled with that. I mean, and of course, a lot more of us are discovering that now. I know when I was in 9 to 5, I didn't realize how much of a transition that drive back and forth was. for better or worse, right? I mean, I would drive to work and I would go from like this whatever home Avi, personal Avi to this work Avi, and work Avi was was a different person, thought differently. It's weird, right? I mean, I turned into a different character, and then I drove home, and it was the same transition the other way around, and now I don't have that, right? So, how's your experience been with that?
Yeah, the duality or taking the stress from work to home, and when you do it at home, it's all blends together. So it's even harder to split because now you don't have a location that you drive to where you can take all your work stuff.
Yeah,
So I had to learn to do that. My wife has said it's like, oh, you seem a little stressed right now. It's because I'm here in the basement in this room and I was doing some work or a stressful project, and then I walk right outside the door and with family, right? So, and I think this, with COVID and everything, that's put everybody in that situation. Is there's no real separation, but with that freedom comes kind of a transition too into this new period,
yeah,
and with the freedom, I think too is I think that you touched on it in the beginning, as you learn sales, right? Sales is hard. What is sales, right? And um, I've had to learn that because most of my career has been on the
yeah,
technical side. But to be honest, it's actually a lot of it was interfacing with the customer, and I didn't realize a lot of that was negotiation and sales too. Is because you're a lot of it was really just building trust with the customer, that they trust
yeah,
you to deliver value. So I've learned that sales isn't that bad because I'm building a relationship with somebody and a
yeah.
friendship, and to me that's what sales is now. And I have this quick story of people when I did my 3D printing thing, and I was 3D printing face shields and face
So wait,
masks,
wait,
and
wait. So I think
yeah.
I just want to give people a little bit of
Oh yeah,
context
sure.
here. So oh, that's coming up, folks. But so three CD19, is that right?
Yeah, 3D C19. Yep.
Oh, three. Sorry, DC. Wait, I'm
3D
not.
and then C19 for COVID
Got
19.
it.
So
Okay,
3D
three D
fight
C19.
against COVID.
So yeah, so
3D
I got
C19.
that slide up. So you, so you gave up your Power BI focus for I think about 6 weeks or maybe a little longer, and you
Right?
dove into this pretty much setting up like a nonprofit company from scratch, right? And how
Right.
many people were involved in this?
We had probably 400 3D printers run by 200 people around the
Wow,
country. And then we had probably 30 sewers, 20 to
yeah,
30 sewers signed up. And then we
great,
had a whole 100 people in marketing. So this was a massive effort that was all volunteer to get face shields and masks
great,
out to people.
great,
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. So great, Zach. Continue on. So you're gonna tell us something about that.
Oh, and this kind of goes into the flexibility. So I remember 5 weeks into it, I checked my account, my bank account, right, and I looked at how much money had come in, and there was a goose egg at the bottom. And I should have taken a screenshot, right? I was like,
Yeah,
wow, for the
yeah,
it. I've been so busy. I've been doing all this
yeah,
work, and
yeah.
there's been zero money coming into my bank account.
Mm-hmm.
But to be honest, I was making an impact, and I was so happy and proud, and my family was proud of me. My kids were like, "Wow, you're doing," and they were
Yeah,
helping. The face shields, and I was like, "This is kind of like Simon Sinek. This is the infinite game. I'm doing
yeah,
something for society." And I'm
yeah,
finding out now there's a lot of people that are coming back to me, and there was a trust established. It's like, "Wow, Charles, you're doing this, adding value to everybody's lives."
yeah,
And now they're coming back and it's like, I can trust you, so I want to do business with you, right? So
yeah.
to me, it was all an investment in building trust, in creating these strong relationships for people. And it's not really selling. It's not like the old style
Mm-hmm.
salesy, spammy stuff. It's I'm building trust and good relationships with people, and people come and help you out too. So,
Wow.
but the freedom to do that is what I enjoy the most. It's like, today I can just say I'm going to spend the next 5 weeks helping people out, and I hope they return and help me with my company. But I
Yeah.
have the freedom to make this choice to make an impact.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I know that since then, so folks, hey, what goes around comes around, right? I mean, you do good and it comes back, and I believe it comes back 10x, right? So that's how things work. So of course, this is not why Charles did it, right? I mean, he went all in. He's like, he gave up. He's had the conversation with his family. He's like, hey, is it okay if I do this? And he got the permission. He dove right in because he wanted to help people. But you can see right here, hey, we're Power BI folks, so we carry Power BI wherever we go, right? So he built this dashboard, and of course, people took notice. So he had hundreds of people, different organizations working with him, and they noticed, like, hey, this is pretty cool. Tell us more about it. So so good things have happened, right? So I know he talked about the goose egg, but people have been in touch with him since then. So is there any specific? So Charles, one thing that I initially struggled with quite a bit, even well now I'm a lot more comfortable with it. But again, that this whole thing about like there's no drive home, right? I mean, if I was staying late at work, I was very aware of it initially. But now I'm sitting in my home office, right in my bedroom, and there's no transition, so I could be at my desk and I would look at the clock and like, oh my God, it's 11 or 10 or right. So it's easy to do. Do you find yourself doing that? Have that happening once in a while? Do you try to manage that better? Do you have any tricks around that?
I do, and I have a great trick. So I learned, I think I read Getting Things Done, and then you recommended The One Thing, the book. So Getting Things Done is just kind of a task management system. And so this is what I do is I write everything down during the day. If there's a task or to do, I have a notepad, several notepads here. I just write stuff down. It's like, oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. And then I put it into the software called Toodle-Doo, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just a task tracking, and then you tag it with like priority, and then I just leave it in there until the next day or whenever that task comes up, because you can set due dates. And
Yeah.
every single morning, I made this my habit, but I go in there, and sometimes the night before is I look at everything on my list. I prioritize it based on the one thing. So I have it right here.
Wow.
Um, so then I pick out, that day, these are like the top 5 or the top 10 things I need to really, really
Yeah.
focus on. And then, and then I have filler items like rank B, rank C. And then I kind of plan out my day at
Yeah.
the beginning of the day. And actually, sometimes I plan it the day before. And it is so awesome because I don't get into those ruts where I don't know what I'm going to do that day. It's like the night before, I'm already thinking. It's like, oh, these are the top 5 things I need to do, and it's
Yeah.
it's like your brain already arranges it. So the next day you wake up and you're like, okay,
Yeah.
boom, get those 5 things done. And that also gives me, the freedom at the second half of the day. And
Yeah.
that this is another thing I do is I run at lunch, right? I get on the treadmill and I put up
Uh-huh.
your videos or Kerbal
Yeah.
or Matt Allington's,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
and then I watch those. But that running at the middle of the day, you know how this second half of the day sometimes you're just drained, right? But I
Mm-hmm.
found that by exercising in the middle of the day, it gives you the energy to
Wow.
finish off the day. So then I'm energized to go after the second half of the day, and I've got this list already provided for me. It's like I've got energy, I've got a list of things to do. Boom, attack it, and it just gives you a sense of huge accomplishment because
Yeah.
you've worked on the right things, right? Because you've already planned it out that morning or the day before. So those are my tips. So
Yeah. Well, that's great, and certainly, I have been kind of noticing the afternoon slump. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes like, oh God, I'm just dragging my feet, and it can be tricky. So working out in the afternoon, that's interesting. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, maybe hop on a. So I have got a stationary bicycle, and maybe hop on that in a little bit. So hey, quickly, I just want to. So folks, yeah, technical questions. Well, if you can help each other out a bit on this call, that's great. Otherwise, for technical questions, the best call is our Q&A call, which we do once every month. You can go to talkpowerbi.com for that. And somebody said, "Oh, so ugly is the selling." We're gonna talk about that. So yeah, that's kind of coming up next. So flexibility. Um, I'll admit that I'm not. I don't feel like I'm halfway as organized as you. Although I mean that's. I want to pause there and I remember this conversation in our entrepreneur community, and somebody said, you know what, I didn't do this. I didn't do this to have this rules and stuff around me to the to-do list, right? I'm a free bird, and I'm gonna, right? I mean, just operate, right? But what our coach said that you don't realize that the ultimate freedom comes from structure, Because if you are structured, then you can kind of free your mind. Then you can say, "Yep, now I'm done with my work, moving on." Right? And whatever, taking the evening with spending the evening with my family, or spending a week or a month off here because I've been structured and organized and doing my work. So awesome. I mean, love that. I will say to the audience that I don't have that approach. I don't really have a to-do list. I don't really make that. I've tried that in the past, hasn't quite worked. So yeah, for better or worse, I work in a very intuitive fashion nowadays, and which is kind of odd because I'm very right. I'm supposed to be a Power BI kind of data-driven guy, but but yeah. So I would do kind of meditate, and in my meditation, there's this part which where you visualize your future 3 years from now, and then you kind of right and visualize your day. But yeah, it's very intuitive and what I feel pulled towards. So maybe not as structured. And I think I and again, flexibility is a double-edged sword. So I do see the repercussions because a lot of times a week, a day, a week, a month can go by, and I'm like, what the heck was I doing, or what? So sometimes that happens, but generally, well, yeah, I mean, it kind of works out. But yeah, so maybe there's a blend, folks. So yeah, you can, so you got both of us, so you can take the pieces that work for you. Maybe do the meditation in the morning, but then do the to-do list. So that's great.
There's different routes. Yeah, I've developed this over the years. I think I was more of the unstructured side, and then I kind of like control and structure. So I kind of went. I think as you're suggesting, I really went to the extreme. So not this is
Yeah,
not for everybody.
yeah,
So, but I also learned from you. So Avi, I want to add, the meditation thing.
yeah,
So the end of the day, that has really helped me out. I do a mindfulness meditation at the end of the day
yeah,
because by structuring and doing all these to do's, you put yourself in a mindset of ultimate structure, right? And you get these thoughts in your head, right, of all these things you got to do. But that meditation and kind of that exercise in the middle day kind of
yeah.
it frees your thoughts and kind of says, okay, this is work stuff. Now return to just being yourself and being present in the moment and being with family. So I do a meditation at the end of the day too, just to be present and get myself away from that structured to do task list.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's definitely inspiration for me. Uh, yeah, I'm not that regular with the evening or the nighttime, but I know when I do
Mm,
it helps. It just brings
yeah.
it home. Um, yeah, awesome. So let's move on to the next thing, the bad. And maybe there are other things people are uncomfortable about, and of course selling, we put that in the ugly bucket because that's not necessarily because we feel that way. We'll talk more about that, but that's the biggest thing that I hear from others, that, oh, I don't want that life, I'm fine with that 9 to 5 and all that stuff because I just want to do the tech stuff. So we'll talk about that. But I know when I left my job. So of course we've had different paths. You transitioned uh, pretty rapidly, I must say. I mean, I've seen some people who transition over time. And folks, it's your choice. It's totally up to you. And of course, if you haven't realized, we're kind of moving to what's called the side gig economy. And the last study that I read was said that by 2025, more than 50% of us are gonna have basically are going to have the side gig, right? So, right, so are going to be freelancing to some extent, part time or full time, and that study maybe a few years old, and I would bet that this whole craziness going around with coronavirus, I think that is going to be massively accelerated, big time. I mean, for one, everybody is used to working remotely, right? I mean, earlier it was like, no, we want somebody on site, and now, well, that's not an option, right? So, and a lot of other things are gonna push the momentum in that direction. That's kind of happening anyway. So it's either you can wait for that change to happen to you, or embrace the change, right? So I think it's just a matter of kind of when, not if, your life is going to be impacted by that. But so I know I went cold turkey. I mean, I walked into my manager's room and said, "Well, I got a dream to pursue, and it's been great working with you." And it was a great team, and I love that team. So this is the second team in the Microsoft that I work with. Love that team. Love the manager. I loved the work that I was doing. Of course, it was all around Power BI at that point of time. But yeah, I felt compelled that I had a bigger mission to kind of reach out a bigger audience, and uh, yeah, so I felt like I had to leave. Now, I don't know, good or bad. I mean, that's the decision I took. I really struggled. I did have savings at that point, mm, but man, I burned through them pretty quick. I mean, I think I had 6 months of savings, and of course, I don't know what I was thinking. Actually, I wasn't thinking much. I didn't have a plan. I just felt really pulled by the dream in my heart. So again, I don't recommend this to anybody. But that's my story, and so yeah, man, that hurt. That whole paycheck. It was maybe a year or 2 years till I stopped thinking about that paycheck. I mean, within the first few months, year and a half maybe, this thought would keep going in my head, like, what did I do? I made the biggest mistake. I mean, that life was so good, and the paycheck would just show up. How easy it was. Um yeah, so that was a bit of a struggle. So tell me. So of course now I've kind of seen the good side of this too, but tell me how did it go for you? How did your story look like? How did you handle any challenges that came?
Yeah, Avi. So it's interesting. This kind of parallels the to do list thing. So for
Yeah,
you, kind of more of a free. How are you feeling? And for me, it was like study, figure out.
yeah,
You know, and so I remember, and my wife is also, she's a spreadsheet data, and we had a spreadsheet of all the risks. If I was to take this journey, here's all the risks. And I attacked each
wow,
one. I think the main one we were worried about was the healthcare thing, healthcare
yeah,
costs. And I remember,
yeah.
and everybody gets so worried. And I remember I was like, all right, I'm going to take
Ouch.
action and I'm going to mitigate this risk. So I just started calling up healthcare
Yeah.
companies and I was like, you insure like solopreneurs and people that do BI? And they were like, oh yeah, we'll send you a quote. And then I got the quote and I was like, oh, that's not too bad. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I started looking at my runway, and I think Race had talked about this too. Is it's so you're like, oh, I'm going to run out of money, but
Yeah.
then if you really do an assessment, and I did of, do you have the assets? How long can you go? And really
Yeah.
understand that. So my runway is this long, and if I get to here and I'm not doing where I need to be, I was like, okay, then I can start making other decisions. But
Uh
at
huh.
least like,
Yeah.
okay, I've got 6 months to go, and then on this date I'll reassess if I go back or if I keep going
Yeah.
forward. So for me, it was a long, drawn out study
Okay.
of am I ready? And I had all my fears and risks written down, and I had attacked each one, and
Yeah.
had it mapped out, I guess.
Yeah.
So
So folks, of course, the story is that Charles joined our program, learned Power BI and the Pro Plus, and now he's a coach in a Pro Plus program too. Besides, of course, running his own consulting solopreneur company. But Charles, I think we have talked about this, man. If you were swapped like a few years, it would have been reversed. you know, because yeah, maybe I could have learned a lesson or two. So man, it was I didn't do any math, so I had never had to worry about finances before this, because we live kind of simply, and yeah, and the paycheck showed up, and all the bills were paid, and whatever was left, we would put away in savings or invest in 401k or whatever, or travel, right? I mean, I never thought about it, so so obviously when that didn't change when I kind of left my job, and that's why maybe I was hit so hard when we got the first NSF notice, the non-sufficient funds check, or an electronic check or something had bounced, and I got that, and it was the shock of my life, because I never dealt with anything like that, right? And man, from that point till let's call it when I made it, right? It was a struggle. I mean, that whole thing was so new, of before you go to right, I mean, grocery store, you're watching the counter tick up, and it's like, oh boy. And if you walk into Costco or something, it can be like 200 bucks, and then like, oh, let me check my bank account. I had never been
yeah.
there, so that part did not feel good. That part did not feel good. So folks, yeah, I mean, you can kind of manage it well, better than that. You don't have to go through that pain. And again, of course, the biggest thing that I did was kind of went cold turkey. Instead of that, if you transition, pick up a side gig, just see how it works. Hey, who knows? Maybe you're gonna hate consulting, or hate the flexibility you get with it, or whatever, right? So just try it out. Um, there was one thing, so in some ways, of course, when I'm talking to others, and so our coach taught us this, and he said that if you're going through hell, right? I mean, it feels kind of hard. I mean, think about any superhero, and there's always conflict, there's always strife, there's always struggle they have to overcome. Without that, there's not going to be any superhero stories. Not any good ones, at least, right? I mean, boring ones, which nobody would want to watch. Like, who's this guy, right? So when you're going through, that is part of his story. So of course, here I am telling that story, and there were some. So there's that aspect, right? I mean, that's how I at least I don't know rationalize it, or at least that's how I absorb it. That's what it means for me. Uh, but the other part is that, and again, I don't recommend this path, but there is a huge advantage for that path. It's basically had burnt my boats, right? I mean,
Mm.
man, there was no going back, right? I mean, it was, I had to make it work for the sake of my family. So, yeah, in a way, that drove me. But anyway, that's kind of the story. So I think savings kind of help. What you talked about was kind of managing, just tracking what your expenses. We did get better at that. I mean, we kind of reduced our footprint. We realized that, oh, we don't really need that much. We don't really need to spend on that much. So that got us by. Um, but there's one thing, especially you mentioned Medicare, and I've heard people talk about that, saying, "Hey, Avi, Medicare is expensive, right?" And that's the biggest reason. That's the biggest hurdle. And I had two thoughts about that. For one, anything that you're thinking of doing, I think barriers to entry can be a great thing, right? Because if something doesn't have a
Mm.
barrier to entry, man, then everybody can flood it. But think about
Yeah.
this. A lot of people have this and a whole bunch of other mental blocks of why they can't do it, right? They think it's, oh, I can't handle the variable income. Oh, I don't know how to do the healthcare stuff. I'm scared of selling. But I think those are all great things because if you can navigate those waters, maybe with some help, right? Then great. Then you're on the other side, and yeah, you can reap the benefits there, and others are still stuck on the other side again. So the barrier to entry, that isn't a bad thing. But of course, what I find interesting is that, so I know somebody who uh, who started a few years earlier than me, and I was talking to one of our common friends, and he said, yeah, they're like their run rate is like 10 million a year now, and yeah, so that's one thing which I like about this life. So, man, I don't know about you, Charles, but all of my life, man, I've done a whole bunch of performance reviews and I've gotten good ratings and maybe not so good ratings, right? But my
Yeah.
raise was always in single digits. I have to
Yeah.
admit, of course, sometimes it was zero, right? I mean, like no raise this
Yeah.
year. And times are tough, and mostly it was in low single digits. 2%, 3%, right? I mean, yeah, I think my best year might have been 5%. But man, you can have in a business, you can have years where you double your business. It may not happen every year, but business that's
Right.
not unheard of at all. So yeah, I mean, there is this a huge upside, and here people are worried about the right. I mean, the medical insurance costs. So the friend who's now running a 10 million business, I mean, obviously, if you'd have been so concerned about the medical insurance, you would have never taken that step. So
Yeah.
cool. Any other thoughts around this? Anything that you do right now to kind of manage it better?
Um, well, I want to go back to something I think you pointed out to me. The medical stuff. It's 10,000 potentially for a family. That's where I got some of my quotes, and I think you pointed out when I first start joined the Pro Plus program. But relative to 10,000, a lot just looked in isolation is a
Yeah,
large amount. But compared to the upside now, like you're saying, you
yeah,
don't have any ceilings now.
yeah,
You're not stuck in that. This is the engineering typical salary, average salary.
yeah,
You're like, I can go as high as I want with this thing because this thing it's
yeah,
your own business. You can build your own house as big as you want and
yeah,
just keep growing with it. So then if you look at it that way, like, man, a year from now, 2 years from now, I could build this thing into a pretty big house, and health insurance cost is now tiny compared to this thing you've
Yeah.
built. So I
Yeah.
think that was a key for me too. Was when you pointed that out. It's like this is a big cost. Look in isolation, but look at
Mm-hmm.
bigger picture, full
Yeah.
context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And of course, as I said, folks earlier, I mean, don't jump in like I did, right? I mean, you can transition slowly. Um, yeah. Before we move on though, so I want to talk about the next one, the selling. That's the big fear that I hear. And yep, we don't want to do that. We just want to do Power BI, and I get that. But earlier we were talking about kind of flexibility and a lot of that, and you obviously know. I mean, I've been pretty focused on the word success for a while. Right? I mean, what does it
Yeah.
mean and so forth. And of course, I feel like there are these internal success and external success. And folks, you're hearing us talk about all of this, right? I mean, and however you perceive it, right? I mean, kind of the money, the flexibility, all of that, and those things are fine, but those aren't tied to happiness because there are people who are at our level or even much higher. I know a few of them, and they're not happy. They're Some of them are actually pretty miserable, and nothing like I'm not judging them or anything, but yeah, those two things are not necessarily connected, right? So, you're gonna have to kind of watch your internal journey as well as you go through this. Reggie has a question, and he's saying, "Hey, has your PMP helped you with your Power BI Pro business?"
My PMP has, so along the lines of the research and study. So I studied all these certifications and all the different types, PMP, there's CSEP
Yeah,
for systems engineering. And I read somewhere that ROI for a PMP is really, really high. And there's a barrier to entry because you got to study for the test. You got to have a certain amount of hours in. And I learned a few tools that I could apply. So for me, the PMP, when people judge you, that's the thing about sales is people are trying to evaluate if you have enough enough ability to add value.
yeah,
And this was a stamp that kind of like the MVP stamp or the Microsoft partner. It's you've done the work, you've done the studying, and you can show this person that I've gone through the work to do some upfront work to show you that I can finish your job and add value to your work, to your company or whatever.
yeah,
So yeah, the PMP has added value for me in terms
yeah.
of credibility.
Yeah. So of course, people ask me a lot of times about kind of the Microsoft certification as well, and I have talked to others who kind of hire Power BI people, right? So I've talked to people on that side, and consistently the answer that I got was that it's never your certificate that's going to get you the job, right? That's never going to happen. But it can do other things. Like it can in that resume pile, and the virtual, but imagine it as a physical pile. It can bump you a few steps up, so they can use that as a kind of a screening thing. It's like, oh well, yeah, certification. Maybe it's worth talking to that person, but then you are on your own. And of course, I've seen this phenomena where people either get their certificate and then get a job and then join my program. It's like, Avi, now I really really need to know how to actually use it, right? I mean, so yeah, but yeah, so that can be an assist, but there are of course other kind of powerful ways. So, um, oh gosh, I had a thought about kind of selling. So before we kind of dive into this whole selling business,
Yeah.
maybe a link between this and the flexibility one. So our coach shared this line with us, and he said, "Hey, there's working in your business and working on your business, and that's a
Mm-hmm.
big distinction." I think for any kind of business owner, entrepreneur, solopreneur, freelancer, doesn't matter what you are, right? I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
time are you working in your business where you're delivering working with a client or doing whatever, right? In my case, maybe creating training videos and stuff, versus working on your business where you're thinking about the strategy, thinking about what the funnel is, something like that. um,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how do you kind of manage your focus there? Do you consciously uh, kind of think about the time, like on my business, in my business, or does it just happen kind of
Um,
organically?
it, very difficult when you're starting out and you've gone from the corporate world where time is money and you get paid for the eight
Yeah,
hours, and then you come out here and you're like, well, I could be spending 2 hours here editing a video, and it's not going towards paid time, right? So
yeah,
there's this SG&A world where it's just kind of working, kind of building up your business. And that was the biggest struggle. And I've heard a lot of other, consultants and friends with other businesses. They're like, oh, I need to do the work. Like one is in housing
yeah,
construction. He's like, it was cheaper because I can do the work and then I don't have to pay myself. And I was like, it's actually, I think about it now as very expensive
yeah,
because you're the most expensive work because you're the one that can grow
yep,
and get more leads. But if you're not doing that, then you're just
yeah,
working inside the business and kind of that time you learn more to value your time and where, and then you're like, I got to spend part of my day, building up the business and getting the
yeah,
leads too. And I think Raul commented in the link, he's like, I spend 50% of my time. He did it on a link yesterday, I think, when I
yeah,
promoted this video. But he's like, I have to spend 50% of my time
yeah,
building leads and new sales because if you don't,
yeah,
your company can't continue. And
yeah,
yeah, so it's a real struggle when you first start out. It's like, the sales stuff, doing videos, getting the word out there, doing presentations at networking events. You're
yeah,
like, this is not going to pay me,
yeah,
but I still got to do this to tell my
yeah.
story to the
It,
world. Yeah.
it is a little bit of a shift, right? And
Yeah.
um, Yeah, and I, and I've said this, folks, on this channel before, is that so what is the struggle? I don't think the struggle is the work. So as I've said before, I mean, man, if you leave the 9 to 5 but don't leave the 9 to 5 mindset behind, guess what? You're never gonna succeed, right? So because we're so stuck in that employee mode and say, yep, the harder you work, the better your results are gonna be. That's not how business works. In fact, our coach has this mantra, which I believe in, and it's going to sound crazy. It did sound crazy to me the first time I heard it, but I believe it's true. And his mantra is, the less I work, the more I make. Because what it's really about is, as Charles is saying, is that, and again, you got to be careful of what that work is. So when you're working on your business, I'm focused on building essentially systems and engines and processes that are pretty much going to sustain themselves, or that can be run with minimal effort, and that's what I focus on. And one thing that we talk about inside our program quite a bit, Pro Plus, and that I learned from my coaches, is that this idea of building only one bridge at a time. Because when you're starting out, it feels right, that to so, oh, I'm gonna hedge my bets, right? I'm gonna play it safe. I'm gonna try this and this. So I'm trying these 4 different things or 5 different things, and one of them is gonna work. But of course, what I've actually found is the opposite of that. And again, I mean, your coaches who are, well, quite a bit further ahead in the journey, both in the kind of the inner success and outer success. And they said, yeah, just focus on one bridge, right? I mean, one bridge at a time, and that's actually the safest path, because that increases your chances of success the most. So yeah, so you gotta have that mindset. Now, of course, now I realize that that mindset can be employed. Well, when I was an employee, now that I look back, I mean, I know people who operated that way. And so I was so focused. So same way, I mean, working in your business versus working on your business. I mean, there's a distinction where, yeah, I mean, we all do our jobs, hopefully, well, right? But there were times when I was thinking more about my career, doing things there, but there were times when I wasn't. I was just too busy being busy. And that, I feel, is the biggest risk in that 9 to 5 and the 9 to 5 mindset, right? I mean, people get too busy just being busy. It kind of becomes an excuse or whatever. And yeah, that's all they're doing. Um, and I think Denzel Washington had this line where he said, uh, gosh, I don't know. Don't confuse kind of activity with progress, right? So you can be, kind of, thrashing around, really, quite a bit, right? Making a lot of splash, but you're not making any progress. So You got to be careful of that. All right, so let's dive into kind of selling. So yeah, that's the scary bit for a lot of people, and they're saying, man, I love Power BI. I love doing this stuff. And yeah, I would love to help others. I would love to go out there and help people. But I'm an introvert, or I'm just not good at this. And the selling, I don't want to sell. Selling feels queasy. I'm not good at it. And on and on and on. And man, there's like an endless thing and endless variations I hear of this. What would you say to them?
Oh my
Like,
gosh,
should
this
they
is
should
such
they should they yeah,
yeah.
just stay there and say, yep, yeah, guys, if that's scary for you, don't do it. Yeah.
This is as Ian would say, this is a meaty topic. A lot of meaty.
All right.
Um, so and when I first started this journey, I was super scared. I think somebody just commented about imposter syndrome.
Mm,
That is a very real, very true thing. You get on these calls, you're sweating, you're like, oh,
yeah.
they're not going to like my work. They won't think I'm good enough.
Yeah.
And then, but after a while, you learn that there's that pyramid. I think you showed it once. It's like there's people all up and down, and the problem with people that are watching all these webinars and Michael Russo and all these,
Yeah.
you're like, oh man, like Power BI, there's so much to it, and I'm not good enough,
I'm
and I can't.
nothing. Yeah.
I'm
Man, I
nothing. And
look at their stuff and I feel like nothing. I'm like, man, I don't even know 1%. I mean, there have been
right,
times when I was like really upset and I felt ashamed to so our channel is Power BI Pro, um, uh, and I felt like, man, I mean, how can I call myself a pro? I'm not even that. Um, yeah, quick side story though. The way I got out of that is that I said, you know what, the pro
right,
tag is not for me. It's for who I'm coaching and training, and I want them to be far more successful than me. And a lot of them have become successful. So that's how I kind of had to explain it. But yeah, that can be a struggle. So cool. Keep
yeah.
going. Tell me more about that.
No, I would get on these calls and true imposter syndrome. I was like, why am I doing this when there's somebody like these
Yeah.
legends, that do this? But there's so many people that need our help with Power BI. And
Yeah.
so you learn that you're part of this pyramid and there's people down at the bottom. And those people up here, they're for a special kind of project, but there has to be a whole
Yeah.
middle layer to help everybody else. And once I got some of these leads and I got made some of these calls, and then the people came back for
Yeah.
second or third. I have one now coming back for the fourth round. Like, you know, now I was like, oh, it's not sales anymore. I've built a relationship with this person and I can add value to them and so much
Yeah.
value. Like they're so thankful, right? So
Yeah.
so then you're like, I'm not an imposter. I'm really doing something good. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing is, I think and I fell in this trap too. I was like, I gotta read all these books, and my
Yeah.
technical ability has to be, Michael
Yeah.
Russo before I can help somebody, and that's not true. And I think that's where your program helped. Is there's kind of 20% of the stuff you learn, the data modeling, and kind of Matt Allington talked
Yeah.
about. You let just learn this amount, you can help 90% of the people, and
Yeah.
there's 10% of jobs, and maybe the upper crust can help with, but
Yeah.
you can help so many people. And then once I started learning that
Big
and
time.
customers were like, oh yeah, you're helping me, then you realize, oh, I'm not an imposter. I'm actually
Yeah.
adding value. And people are really super thankful and they're going to pay me and they're
Yeah.
happy to pay me.
Yeah.
Once you get over that hump and that realization, then it's not
Yeah.
selling anymore. It's just like
Yeah.
helping people out. So
There you go. I think that's the key word. Yeah, it's not selling anymore. So, folks, yeah, you gotta, so what I say is that, yeah, if you can't win the game, know that you can change the game. And that's what I've kind of realized about life. Frankly, I quit my job around when I was 40, and I was starting to see it already as how kind of you get, right? I mean, it becomes so tricky and when you're stuck in a 9 to 5, right? I mean, you've gotten promotions and now you're getting this paycheck, and it gets harder and harder to move up. That's pretty hard. And then, of course, there's a sword hanging on your head that if I lose my job, how will I find something else which is like this? Uh, so it's hard to win that game. You got to change that game. We'll save that for another day. But but I think you touched on something which is really big, probably bigger than this whole selling thing, which is let's call it not good enoughness. And I think a lot of
yeah,
us suffer from that. and it, folks, is real. So let's just kind of acknowledge it for once. And for one, you heard Charles kind of talk about it, and so we have a Pro Plus members. It's a small group. It's a group of about 30 people, and a lot of them have been in this program for a year. Some of them have been in this program for 6 months, and these, as far as I can see it, they're the best of the best, right? So they go through quite a bit of screening process. They go through a personal one-on-one call with me, and they fill out a survey, and we talk, and yeah, I'm kind of. I'm looking at kind of what spirit they carry in their heart, what's the mission, what's the passion, and yeah. So if you've seen the Pro Plus program, we kind of go for three things like you're focused on kind of making an impact. I'll just bring that up really quick. Uh, let's see if I can remember the three. Make an impact, do what you love, live by your own rules, right? So I'm looking for this. So they clear a lot of hurdles, and then they're in this program, but still, when I talk to them, of course, Charles is now a Pro Plus coach as well, so I'm sure you've had these conversations. Is that this,
Yeah.
what did I call it? The not enoughness. It keeps coming up. You say, Avi, am I good enough? I don't think I'm good enough. Avi, am I good enough? I don't think I'm good enough. And of course, guys, the thing is that game is very hard, if not impossible, to win. Because Charles, that still happens to Charles. I can guarantee it. There's still moments when the not enoughness rears its ugly head. I mean, this is really ugly stuff we're talking about, right? Because man, that stuff is nasty. And guess what? It happens to me too. And my theory is, and that's the challenge, right? I mean, when I talk to people and I say, "Yep, I suffer from this," sometimes I feel that I'm not good enough, that I'm a sham, an imposter. That, oh, because I don't know calculate, table, and summarize, I shouldn't be here doing this. I shouldn't be helping people. I'm a fraud. They're gonna find out and they're gonna throw stones at me. That's what goes on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, "Whoa, Avi, no, man, what are you talking about?" Right? I mean, right? So we see somebody is up there and impervious to all of this, and maybe you see Charles that way, maybe you see me that way, and of course, sitting here, sitting where I am right now, and man, I'm looking up like, oh gosh, Marco Russo, Alberto Ferrari, and I'm doing what people do to me. I'm like, no, they can never have a moment of doubt in their life, can they? Can they really? But again, it's a working theory. I would love to ask them someday, I guess. But my theory is they go through a version of that too. And guess what? The same way, people look up at Charles or me or other members in this group, or I have a theory that they have somebody in their lives too who they look up, and maybe it's not around Power BI, but maybe it's around their business, and they're like, oh man, if only your business was there. So that not enoughness, man, it's a disease, and it's gonna bring you down. And my theory is that that game you can't really win because, as I said, it still comes up for me. So what do you do if you can't win the game? You gotta change it. You gotta change the game. And for me, the switch has been exactly what Charles found out, right? When you make it about the other person, say, oh, I can help them, and that's what he was talking about. Like once you start helping people, it's not about you, So you're not so focused on your own insecurity and not enoughness, and you're saying, well, maybe I'm not perfect, but look, I can help somebody else. Now I'm gonna do a quick story here from one of our other favorite members, Grace Dio, and Charles. Maybe
Oh
you've heard it,
yeah.
but man, this is I love this, right? In a conversation, Grace once said something like, "Well, it's kind of a surprise that we're so messed up, but we can still help people." And folks, so sometimes, and that's why I love this idea of kind of coaching and community. And of course, I got lucky as an entrepreneur to stumble into a great group when I left my job, and after all the struggle, that's what saved me. And now, of course, I've kind of recreated the same thing here, is that we can't see ourselves. It's like being inside a wine bottle and trying to read the label. But when we see somebody else, boom, the light bulb. It's so easy. We don't have to work hard. So I struggle with the same thing, right? Like, man, I'm so messed up. It's kind of a surprise I'm still functioning. I'm working, right? It's, wow, I don't know how to do that, right? But when Grace said it, the answer was obvious to me. I said, Grace, I think you're missing the point. It's not that we can help other people in spite of being so messed up. We can help other people because we are messed up. That's what is allowing us, enabling us. That's the power behind us. Because
Yeah.
imagine somebody who was perfect and their life was perfect and had always been perfect. How many people would they be able to help? Zero. Because for one, they wouldn't connect with anybody, right? Like, wait,
Yeah.
right? I
Nobody's
mean, so
perfect.
in our program, I mean, think about this. I mean, most of the people, well, not most of the people, a lot of people are struggling with this not enoughness. If I hadn't experienced that myself, if I wasn't kind of messed up slightly inside either, how would I ever help them? That would be alien to me. It's like, dude, just get over it, right? And unfortunately, that's a lot of advice that it's out there, like just do it, right? And man, if just do it worked, everybody would have made it, but they don't because there are these things you got to be aware of. But again, I feel like the coaching community can help. So boy, this got way deeper than I imagined. So let's come back to kind of selling. So let's get
Yeah.
kind of specific. So folks, yeah, I mean, if you can win the game, change the game. And hey, I always worked had a 9 to 5 job employee. I'm not a salesperson, right? So I came with the same thing as like selling. So of course I changed the game. And maybe it is the era that we're in right now. Uh, because everybody has been, kind of sold the heck out. So think about the number of advertising or sales messages we get every day. You can't even count it, right? It's just, yeah. I mean, man, scrolling through every feed, whatever, right? I mean, and of course now we're all staying at home. But somebody was telling me about this technology where you walk into a store and they detect like the ID. You know how your devices kind of broadcasting, connecting to Wi-Fi and that sort of stuff. So they detect the ID, and if you use that same device to go on their website to see their product, they will show you that product. Now, of course, we see this all the time on Amazon, right? You go see a product and then it follows you around everywhere. Like, how do they know I wanted to buy a camping tent, right? So, but it's going to happen like in real life in real stores too, for good or bad, whatever that is. So we're not going to judge that right now, but yeah, we're being bombarded by sales messages. So what is working? And again, I've seen my coaches and I've seen how they're operating. They're all telling me, and they're operating the same way and doing really well. And they're saying the best way to sell is not to sell, right? So we're changing the game. So Charles, yeah, I mean, how do you end up, selling kind of without selling? What kind of things do you find yourself doing? I mean, is it things you're kind of doing on LinkedIn, the way you have the
Yeah.
conversations? Tell me a bit more about that.
I think, yeah, LinkedIn is, I think the shortage is trust. I think, and I think that's why you told me I'm a good storyteller. People can relate to it. People can trust the stories. I'm not perfect and I admit my imperfections on
Yeah.
these shows. And people are like, oh yeah, that's what I do too. And I think the shortage really is trust. And, and I've heard that too, where especially with COVID, there's a mad rush into digital social media, and you can see this on
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn and Facebook, and there's just this blast of ads. And I'm telling the people that buy these ads, like, what I do? I click on that button, says, "Don't show me ads anymore."
Hmm.
I'm just canceling because it's just
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yep.
So what I do different is I just go out there and I put my face and and this is a barrier to entry too, to the people that are watching, is a
Yeah.
lot of people are afraid to put themselves out there,
Mm-hmm.
but I chose, and I was scared. I remember telling you, I would shake. And
Yeah.
what's weird is I was thinking when we were doing this video, I was like, man, I get 3 or 4 times a week. I get
Mm-hmm.
on videos now. I get on live chats, and I don't and it's not about me anymore. So I'm not worried about, how I look, or, and I don't shake anymore. It's because I'm out there just talking and delivering content and value to people and developing trust. And that's really what selling is to me. Is the shortage is trust. The
Yeah.
shortage is people going out there and being authentic with video and with sound and telling their stories. And so
Yeah.
that's what I do now, is I go out and tell my story and build trust with people.
Yeah.
And
Love
and
that.
that differentiates me from, on LinkedIn, I've heard too, is the most trusted platform. So you couple that with video on LinkedIn, you're like,
Yeah.
you're the most trusted
Oh
person
boy. Yeah.
there.
Yeah. I mean, video, I feel is powerful. So folks, yeah, when I stepped in, of course, I felt awkward and all that stuff. But I love video because video has some truth to it. So I realized pretty quickly So earlier we were talking about how I had these two personas, and they were very different. The personal Avi, who drove home, I had this transition, right? I was different. I spoke differently, whatever, right? I mean, I was a different person. I certainly, right? So I had these two different personalities, and I quickly realized that on YouTube, it's impossible to carry on that charade that we do, right? I mean, this button down. It's like, oh yeah, all this, and of course, you've seen, guys, you've seen my transition on YouTube. So I have the screen up there, IKEA roller blinds, really, and I had them pulled down because I was so embarrassed that I'm working out of my bedroom. I didn't want anybody to find out. If my kids would come in, I wanted them to feel like I'm in an office and all that stuff, right? And if my kids would walk in, I would shoo them away. But now, of course, yeah, you can see my bed right there, which is a great thing because I'm forced to make my bed every day, every morning, which is a good habit, I hear. All right, but now when my kids pop over and I'm in a meeting with a client or something, I tell them to say hi, right? And sometimes like, wow, man, I've gone through a lot. So there's something true about video, but I think whether you do video or not, the word that Charles used that really struck me was authenticity. And folks, again, I mean, there is this outer stuff you can do. Is like, yeah, how do you find clients and how do you do LinkedIn posts, LinkedIn articles, da da da. All that list is there, right? But if you ask me, the real journey is the inner journey, and that's letting kind of getting more and more authentic and basically letting your inner awesomeness show, because you are awesome, right? I mean, I hope you realize that by now, right? And so we all have some special gift, right? And so Charles earlier was talking about the pyramid and helping people, and there are those people whom only you can help. You may
Mhm.
not realize that yet, but once you realize that, man, it's a powerful force because there's somebody out there who's drowning. And that's sometimes how I try to envision it, right? And so sometimes people get caught up as like, oh God, I need, I mean, how would I get to 100K or a million or how many clients and all that stuff? I imagine just one person, and I say, hey, there's one person out there who's drowning and they're struggling, and here I am, painting my boat. It's like, no, my boat is not ready. I missed a spot here, right? So we're so focused on ourselves and our stuff, and just go out there and help them. So yeah, I think that's the journey. So boy, we're right on time here. Charles, can you
Yeah.
can you hang out for a little bit?
Yeah, I can hang out. I
Okay.
got a couple stories too. Along the
Yeah.
personas thing, I want to jump on that because when I started this journey, and I did these videos, and you have like an international, so I had connections from all over the world, and they knew me as this Power BI person and
Yeah.
identity. I started to understand that, and so what was really weird was here in town. I was the corporate guy, the family guy, but then on LinkedIn and YouTube and on your shows, I was this Power BI guy that talked
Yeah.
about my journey. But people around here didn't know that, so it was the oddest thing to adjust to because you've got these two almost different personality, different people living, and you're like, this is the same person, but people know you as different things, and I didn't realize that before, but that's an adjustment that I had to
Yeah.
make.
Oh,
So
that's funny. Yeah, it's funny. My daughter, I mean, my kids, they're always I mean, they're supportive, but they also make fun. Like sometimes they, the name, my daughter calls it like Power BI poopy head, you know, and yeah, they're and I don't know, maybe they were like showing their friends my channel or something. Now, of course, it's funny. So when I don't do it as much now, but initially, when my kids' friends would come over, I would like somehow mention in the conversation that I'm a YouTuber, and they would get really excited. Like, oh, you're a YouTuber, and yeah, here's my channel, and they would scroll through the channel a little bit and it's like, this is boring. I mean, they expected on a Minecraft or something like that. It's like, this is boring. Like, why would you do this stuff on YouTube?
yeah,
But yeah, it's been kind of interesting to kind of cross those lines a bit.
I mean, I've had that too, where people around town is like, "Hey, your live show popped up, and I watched 2 minutes, but I didn't understand any of it, so I shut it down."
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
that's very honest.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom complains like, "Yep, I tried to watch it live and it didn't make sense." I'm like, yeah, thanks, mom. And I hope you gave it a thumbs up, right? So let's take Reggie's question,
Yeah,
and I
it's a
think what they're
good one. The
talking
first
about
client.
is Yeah, the first client, and for one, I would say that yeah, I mean, for one, you can see it as a barrier of entry, right? So it can be a good thing. It can be a great thing because it is gonna deter a lot of people, and they're gonna say, "Oh God, that's so hard, I can't do it." And but yeah, the good news is that well, if you can hop on the other side, it's better. So yeah, so Charles, yeah, what do you feel about that? That first client, gosh darn it, right? I mean, if we all
Oh my
just got
gosh,
our first client handed to us,
yeah.
everything would become so much easier.
Yeah, getting your first client is so hard because you're afraid of that rejection. You're afraid of
Mm-hmm.
them saying your rates are too high. I mean, I know we have this conversation on a Pro Plus. It's like where to set rates because you're just so afraid. I think to get on
Yeah,
that call and get rejected. And just recently, I did a compilation of leads and how many, and I had, because of COVID too, I think I lost a whole bunch of leads and I
yeah,
was getting rejected. But I looked at it as an opportunity. Is like,
yeah,
well, a lot of people aren't calling these people and they're too afraid. But I'm calling, and every time I call them, it's market
absolutely.
data. It's something I learned. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like, well, they rejected me, but they rejected me because I couldn't do this type of problem. Or
yeah,
maybe I just my website to not do this problem and only do this one to attract this client. Or they rejected me because they didn't pay this rate. So then I can adjust my rates and stuff. But every time I get a rejection, leading up to that first
yeah.
client, it's
Wow.
it's just market data to give me an advantage over
Whew.
other people that are trying to get in. So
Man, Charles, that's big. I don't think that's big because what that's reminding me, or maybe you've seen that TED Talk. So, folks, if you haven't seen it, then definitely see it. You know where the guy is trying to intentionally fail like 100 times or something. You know the one that I'm talking
yeah,
about. And
yeah, and I've
you're
heard Seth Godin and other people talk about it too.
oh
Yeah.
wow, yeah. So this guy was and he has his weirdest of stories. You know how you walk into a Walmart and sometimes in Walmart they have a greeter, and I think the greeter is
Mhm.
there to prevent shoplifting or something. But there's somebody sitting there and you say, hey, welcome to Walmart, right? And he so this person so again guys he was on a TED talk and it's a great TED talk but he was talking about this intentionally failing, right? Setting yourself up for failure. So he would do crazy things. So one story was that he went to a Starbucks and said, hey, can I be the greeter for the day? And of course everybody was like confused, like what, we don't have greeters. And but they let him be the greeter for a little bit, and then he felt too awkward and he slinked away, right? And there was one where he would knock on people's doors and he would be holding like a potted plant or something and he would say, can I plant this in your yard, right? And the lesson there was that the lady said no, but the lesson there was he asked why. And the reason is that sometimes the fear of something is far bigger than the thing itself, right? So we're so afraid of that rejection because we attach already on our side without anybody else doing it. We attach a whole ton of meaning to it. What are the kind of meaning we attach to it, right? We say, well, we're not good enough, right? I'm not smart enough. I don't deserve that much money. That's why they rejected me, right? I mean, I mean that's I'm not worth that much, right? So and garbage like that. So we say, yep, they said no, right? So this guy said why, and and it wasn't like the lady hated her or thought he was a creep or whatever. She said, oh, I have these kinds of plants in here and it wouldn't fit in my backyard. Oh, actually, come to
Oh,
think of it, this might fit better in the front yard. So, well, if you're not stuck on putting in the back, right? So yeah, man. And that's what I'm hearing from you, right? I mean, that's just a data point. Don't take it personally. And
yeah.
it happened to me a lot, and I think it happens to everybody. Think about any job search you've done. Any job search looks like no, 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 yes, right? Every job search looks like that. But man, in every single no, what do? We beat ourselves up because we say, oh, I'm not good enough. But it's not about that. Most of these job hunts,
Yeah.
right? When that yes happens, what does that happen, man? They love you and they want you to start right away. Every time I switch jobs, I try to take like a week off or something. It's never happened because they're like, no, we want you to start right away. But what about the no and the rejection and not being good enough? Well, it's not about that. It's usually about the fit, right? So I think there's something there. So man, the fear of failure, fear of rejection. So yeah, I would say, folks, if that really scares you, kind of again change the game, make it into a game, right? I mean, I don't know, whatever works for you. Get creative and so forth. Now, of course, we have other strategies. We talk about that in the program, and we wouldn't have time to go into that. But we have this whole 5-step approach. We take the students through. If you've heard about the real Power BI projects, we do that. A lot of that kind of gets them step by small step, closer to getting the first client. Kind of makes that path easier. Matt, good discussion there. Let's see
Yeah.
if something else came up.
Can I add one more
Yeah.
thought to that? A
Yeah.
lot of times with my clients, especially the first ones, I discovered later that they were afraid to talk to me too. So scheduling that first call,
Yeah.
I found that sometimes they were afraid, or a lot of people that we talk to,
Oh,
they've
yeah.
tried Power BI and they've hit the DAX wall, but they don't want to admit it because there's advertising that, oh, Power BI is
It's so
free and easy,
easy.
just
Yeah.
download it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're like, well, I don't want to tell this Power BI expert that I tried it out and I ran into the DAX wall. So I
Yeah.
try to be authentic and talk to them. I was like, hey, I've
Absolutely.
run into the DAX wall many times. I've been
Yeah.
there. Let me help you get through that. And once they realize that you're trying to help them get through their fears,
Yeah.
because there's fears on both sides. And once you
Yeah.
get to that middle point, it's like, you have fears, I have fears. Let's work together and cross
Yeah.
that bridge. So
Boy,
powerful. And these are
man.
the customers that come back 3, 4 times. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Guys, that's incredible. So Charles said, I mean, if you notice that this kind of connects back to what we were talking about being authentic. And of course, so Charles just talked about this, but I've also heard stories from Charles where he told them that, oh, I don't do this. Like, I think it was the Power BI embedded story.
right.
But it seems like because I mean they liked you and they knew you had the Power BI expertise, they still
Right.
went with you because you're like, well, gosh, Dan, he's being so honest about what he knows, what he doesn't know, and we would still hire you, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
so authenticity goes a long way. It may not turn up quite exactly like that, but yeah, that really works. So Reggie has a good one, and maybe so folks, if you're on the phone and if you have any thoughts, any questions, anything you would like to discuss, kind of share from your side, just unmute yourself and share that. Um, and I'll pause just for a little bit if you can find the mute button. All right, but we'll line up kind of Reggie's thing next. So he's got a good one. He's saying, focusing on selling the tech versus selling the story. So of course, man, I'm pretty keen on that one. What's your take on that one?
Yeah, so that's a good one too. You know, I've been going on these LinkedIn Live and just practicing telling my
Yeah,
story, and then I'm matching it with other people's story, and I'm finding
yeah,
that a lot of people don't realize they have a good data story, right? I had a
yeah,
LinkedIn Live show this Wednesday, and I was interviewing someone, and they were like, "Yeah, blah blah blah. We took data on rail, the shape of rail," and I was like, "Shape of a rail, the railroad track."
uh huh,
I think he said rail track. I was like, wait a second. You were taking rail track data? And he's like, yeah, I was, working with a company and they were measuring and taking dimensions because if the rail starts wearing away, then
yeah,
or the distance changes, the you get derailments. And
yeah,
he's like, so we had people going around and measuring the tracks and then aggregating the data. And I was in charge of, analyzing the data. It was like, oh, this track has to be replaced. This one doesn't. But he went through it so fast that he didn't, you know, he had an
mm-hmm,
amazing story
yeah,
about it. He's like, I took the data, I analyzed it, I fixed all
yeah,
this rail, and we reduced the number of derailments. So I think the key thing is we all have stories to
that's
tell.
true.
We have amazing stories, like
Yep,
you've said, Avi, but we just don't know that the world doesn't, that they'll
yeah,
find it interesting and that we have all this experience and stories that we can help others with. So
absolutely,
that's kind of the thing is, yeah, there's a lot of people with so much hidden talent, something they're really good at. They just
absolutely.
don't realize it. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I can't agree more. Yeah, so I think I've seen that. So, folks, yeah, there's on one side where I see a lot of people who don't recognize their own potential, and sometimes I get on these calls. So even where I'm kind of when we're doing that interview with people for our highest level program, the Pro Plus program, somebody would tell their whole life story, and I'm gonna be on the edge of my seat, right? I'm sitting on the edge of the seat. Like, oh my god, this happened, that happened. Whoa, is like incredible. Oh my God, I can't believe you're still standing. I mean, you're such an awesome person to have gone through that and still be standing. You're such an inspiration. So that's what's going on in my head. And then they go through the whole story, and then they end with like slumped shoulders, like, "Look, Avi, I've been a failure, but yeah, I mean, help me." And I'm like, "What?" Right? So, I mean, that maybe sounds too extreme, but it's true. I've seen that a few times. So we don't kind of realize the power of our own stories. And folks, if you need help there, one book that I would recommend is "What Color Is Your Parachute." It's more like of a job hunting book, but it really talks about stories and developing your stories. And man, that was my first experience of stories. And man, I mean, after that, I could nail every interview. I mean, getting it, yeah, right. So, and it had some structure around, you focus on what your strengths are, and then for each of the strengths, you have at least three stories to tell. And of course, the more you tell it, the better you become, and so forth. So, Charles, I love that. I mean, you're immersing
Yeah.
yourself, not only getting to practice your story by going live and doing this stuff, but certainly kind of hearing others. And again, I mean, sometimes you see something or hear something, that, oh, that's great. I mean, that's a great way to do this, right? But of course, you also learn kind of from their mistakes. And I was like, oh, well, they didn't really pause and let the awesomeness shine, right? They went too
Yeah.
fast or something like that. And we often do that too. So that can really help. But yeah, I'm a big believer in that. So Reggie, so on your question, I feel, and of course, everybody in the Pro Plus program, the first thing they hear from me is that don't go out there and be this Power BI person, right? Don't go out there and say, hey, I do Power BI. Focus on the business problem you're solving, right? Focus on the niche that you can help, right? And yeah, go from there. So of course, Greg Berg, one member in our community, and his background is in like aerospace manufacturing, and he saw all that, and he saw all the craziness with the ERP system and the reports and all that stuff, and he solved it within that company. And now, of course, he goes out there and tells that story. He's like, "Yep, I see your pain. I see what you're struggling with. Well, guess what? There is help available, and I've done that for other companies. I can do it for you, right? So, a story can be as simple as that." Charles, you gonna add to that? Oh, network issue, something.
You're just don't like external.
Oh
Oh, there's
wait,
a
yeah,
glitch
yeah.
there.
Start over. Something happened with a
Okay.
network hiccup. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So a lot of times, if you, oh, it says my internet is unstable.
Okay.
I think I'm
Yeah,
back
it's
now.
coming through now. Yeah.
Okay. If you don't have a lot of experience under your belt, what color is your parachute? And there's other behavioral interview questions. Is if you focus on problem solving, your experience problem solving, that's really
Yeah.
what people are asking for.
Yeah.
So that's what I used to do on my first few calls. Is like, hey, I don't have a lot of Power BI experience, but I've
Yeah.
spent years in project management in solving this type of problem. This is how I solved it. And actually, that's how I did my first internal Power BI problem is I knew Excel and pivot charts, and I
Yeah.
took a bunch of Excel spreadsheets, crunched them together, created these pivot charts, told the team that I had solved the problem with the pivot charts. And I was like, and I think I can take this now. You can see the results. I can do a Power BI report with it. So it was something they understood with pivot charts, and then I pivoted to Power BI. So I think if you focus your story on problem solving and the processes, I think that's super powerful, especially if you don't have a lot of Power BI under your belt.
Yeah, sounds great. So hey, man, I was planning to do like a slideshow in the first segment, the flexibility, talk about the life, but I never got to do it. Do you wanna do that, and maybe we can end on that?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Let's end on that.
All
So
right, so go ahead
I'm
and,
curious.
and share your screen, and yeah, so folks, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see what Charles has got in store for us. So, Charles, you should
Oh, you
see
wanted
the
me to show pictures. I actually didn't. I thought you were going to show pictures, so I didn't have any. So
what? No. Okay, we're gonna have to do it next time. So, folks, next time,
all right.
Charles is on the hook. But yeah, so let me share my screen. This one, there we go. Okay, and we can turn this thing off. And yeah, I made a. So folks, yeah, so we were going to talk about our life. So of course, if you go on and learn powerbi.com on our about page, well, a big part of my life is my dog. My family, I guess that's my brother. Everybody else is too shy to to be be on camera yet. I am part of a dance troupe, and I'm too shy for now to share the dance videos, but that has been great fun. That's relatively new for me, but yeah. So we normally perform on stage, and I have like 3 or 4 performances under my belt, and they were exciting. It was a bit traumatic too, but we'll leave that for another day. So no dancing photos here, and of course, since the quarantine days, I've been recording kind of solo videos and doing that. But hiking is
So
another,
Avi,
yeah.
I just want to, and you did one at a big event, right? You did it's a Bollywood style, and you
Yep,
did,
Bollywood
it was
style,
a big
yeah.
event.
Yeah, I think I was talking to somebody and they imagined like ballroom dancing, and I'm like, nope, I'm very
You know,
far from it. Yeah, so yeah, very far from it. So yeah, Bollywood style dancing, and yeah, it's fun. It's high energy. Maybe at some point I will share some videos, and yeah, so hiking, and folks, this is I was talking to a group. So the story here is that you know how we sometimes want to do things or but we never kind of get around to doing it. So I was at a yeah, so hiking was one of those things I wanted to do it, but I wasn't actually doing it, and I started last year. And last year, once I started kind of slowly really doing short hikes and kind of stepped up, but at the end of the year, this thing came to me about this goal of 100,000 feet, and at that point, it sounded crazy, but well, I kind of went in, and the thing that helped was. Is that I've tied it to donating money for a charity. So Operation Smile, and there's a story there of why I'm doing it that way. But yeah, so that's a good part. Let's see. So where's my? Oh, there it is. Yeah. So folks, you all see kind of where I work, but you don't see kind of the other side. So this is how it looks like from where I'm sitting. All right, so I'm gonna give you. So of course, behind my bed, there's not much of a tour there. There's some whiteboards here. There's a calendar over here. There's the Power BI curtains that my sister-in-law, stitched for me. So yeah, this is what it looks like. So this monitor is new. Man, I had to do a lot of googling and figure out and how to add a third monitor, and I needed it for the conference because there was a lot going on. So the Power BI conference. Thanks for those who were there. So this is a new edition. But of course, I got my main kind of big screen and all that stuff. Here's my mic. That's this guy. You know, and what else? Anything noticeable? So this is what I call my board of directors. And this, well, actually, the idea came from my coach as well. So there's 2 of my coaches and a bunny, and yeah. So some of you who have been with me for a while may know the bunny story. I wouldn't go into it now. So bunny is an official, board of directors, and yeah, just kind of a visual something to kind of guide me. One of those where you get stuck in a situation and you was like, oh man, what would Jesus do? So yeah, I ask a version of like, yeah, what would this coach do, or what would the bunny tell me to do, or something like that, right? So that's there.
your dog isn't there. The picture.
Yeah, not
You
in a
lost
board
your
of
dog.
director. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a bunny. And so I work with my coaches almost pretty much it ends up every week, and this is where I write what I'm committed to doing. And one of the things here that you may probably can't read it, but so what my coach caught me doing was whenever I would talk about stuff like this, which is not technical Power BI, which is not DAX, I almost automatically shot it down. I would like, oh yeah, but fewer people would join, but that's okay. It's never gonna get that big, and maybe they wouldn't like it, right? So I would bring it down, and she questioned it, and well, she just frankly pointed it out. She's like, hey, Abby, do you realize you're doing that? Every time you talk about this stuff, you have this mindset that it's not valuable, and of course, folks, I mean, if you ask me, I would say, no, no, no. It's not only valuable; it's the most valuable thing, right? I mean, like today we talk so much about not enoughness, and guess what? If you don't overcome your not enoughness, if you don't transcend that, you are never going to succeed. I can guarantee that to you, right? I mean, you can do all the things and maybe, work really hard and get the money, but guess what? It's a sandcast. It's going to fail, right? So if you ask me, then it's important, but I wasn't acting that way because again, some part of my brain was saying that people are not going to like it. So she just called it out, and that's what the best coaches do. They just hold up a mirror to you. So that's one thing that I'm working on to change that mindset. That no, that is valuable. I know that stuff was valuable to me. That's what helped me. Maybe it's not valuable for everybody, but again, if there's that one person drowning, I'm gonna do that. So that's that, and I don't know if there's anything else noticeable. Oh, by the way, so of course Charles has the fancy lighting. Hey, Charles, can you hold one up? And
Oh,
this is this dimmable one, and yep, so that's pretty nice. I just have these I don't know, Walmart lamps, and this one is kind of slightly broken, and I typically hang like a piece of paper to diffuse the light.
yep.
uh,
I've done that.
yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, that's not working as well. I don't know. Something has changed. So anyway, so that's that. Let's see. What else do we have? Oh yeah, so hiking photos. Yeah. So yeah, guys. So now I go almost every week, and I've been taking. So of course I had this 100,000 feet goal, and man, the only way I can do it is if I go every week and climb 2,000 to 3,000 or 4,000 feet every week. I have to do that, otherwise I just would not make that goal. So I go every week now because of the quarantine. What I had to do was I had to avoid the weekends because weekends it gets a little too crowded. So I've been going on weekdays, which has had another benefit. So I'm effectively, without even realizing it, I've kind of switched to a 4-day work week. So Charles, I don't know
Mm,
if did you come across that study? It was somewhat recent, where
yeah,
Microsoft tested a 4-day work week in Japan, and the numbers said that productivity went up, which
right,
isn't surprising to us, right? Because again, I mean, we operate with the mantra that the less you work, the more you make, kind of thing. So
right.
without realizing it, I guess I'm kind of doing a 4-day work week. Even though we talked about kind of the flexibility, I don't mind working a little bit on the weekend. But yeah, so that's this one is Mount Mount
This one
Baldy.
that,
Yeah, say again.
yep. Oh, I was just going to add, kind of like comment on your post the other day. I almost take a vacation almost every day. There's
Yeah.
periods where I run and hike and stuff.
Yep.
So you change your
Yeah.
mentality, and
That's
it
right.
is kind of
Yeah.
like a four-way
Oh
work
yeah,
week. Yep.
yeah, yeah. I mean, hard work. The harder I work, the more successful, and then people start feeling guilty, right? And when things fail, their solution is to go back in there and work harder. And I compare it to, uh, like hitting your head against the wall, like you're running into a wall and constantly hitting it with your head, and like, oh dang
Yeah.
it, it didn't work last time. I'm gonna run in harder, and I'm gonna smash that with my head harder. I'm like, no, no, just look for a door, mate. Much easier. Yeah. All right. So yeah, that's Mount Si. That's pretty close. This one was Kolchak Lake. This is when I took a week off, and yeah, man, this place was quite pretty. That's the same shot from that one. That's Lake Serene. So this one I don't know in this shot, but I actually accidentally fell into this lake. That was somewhat
Oh,
embarrassing. So yeah, it's kind of hard to see, but I was standing on this rock, and if you see, this rock kind of slopes down into the water, and I kept inching closer and closer, and I thought I was okay, but then I start sliding, and man, I remembered my physics lessons really fast. So the coefficient of friction, it's different when things are stationary. So the coefficient of friction is high. The friction is high. But once it is in motion, the coefficient of friction, it gets much lowered. So while I was standing, I was okay. But once I stopped sliding, there was no hope for me. I was, so yep, like, so I popped into the lake, got all wet. Yeah, so that was that story. This was a bit of a family trip, Diablo Lake. Yeah, so that was that. Oh, this was this Wednesday. And yeah, this was Gem Lake, and yeah, so man, I pretty much stayed in the water for like 30 seconds because it was ice cold. But yeah, refreshing, I would say.
uh,
So
what a
yeah, that's
background.
yeah, and yeah, and frankly, I would say so. I moved here from India, and now many years ago, gosh, 1999, I think. Um, and that's one thing that I love about this country, where I feel like, I really feel like, if you ask me, I mean, at least coming from India, I feel like, man, you don't need money to enjoy yourself and to have the best time of your life.
Yeah.
Um, And of course, like hiking right now almost costs nothing. And I don't buy any of the REI gear. In fact, man, I shop sometimes at the thrift stores. You can pick up a lot of good hiking stuff over there. And yeah, so right, so it's can be a lot of fun. All right, cool. So all I have besides that, do you have anything else? I do have a dog photos. So yeah, let's end on that. So
Oh yeah.
that's yeah, man. I think that's dog is a entrepreneur's best friend, especially
Didn't
works from home.
didn't you say, Avi, that you take the dog out for walks like once or
Yeah,
twice a day, and it gives you a nice break throughout the day?
absolutely.
Now that
Yeah,
you're working from home.
yeah. I think I initially struggled with that a fair bit. Where man, initially I was working kind of so hard, and I would just stay stuck, and there was no boundary, and yeah, man. I mean, frankly, one of those where you're working for hours and then you're like, oh damn, I gotta pee, and then you have to take a break, or you're like, oh god, I skipped lunch. It was a lot of that stuff, and of course, my coaches kind of helped me that whole wash the mindset away where um, the harder you work, the more you make. The opposite of that, less you work, the more you make. But yeah, having a dog forced it, right? You got the dog, and it's like, oh, the dog needs to be walked, right? I mean, you don't want or to be in the house. So I would go out, and I have come to the point where I say, man, any day that I get to walk the dog, which is mostly every day, is a good day, mate. So yeah, folks, that's a glimpse into my life. So yeah, folks, we'll wrap it up. Charles, thank you for your time today. Hopefully, folks, you enjoyed this session, and maybe we'll end with a little bit of so if you want to see what's coming up next, if you just go to our channel, youtube.com/PowerBIPro, we have the good stuff at the top. If you're a beginner in YouTube, that is the place to start, especially the 60-minute tutorial. So that's this stuff right here, learn Power BI videos. But apart from that, upcoming live streams, you can always kind of see that here. It looks like the next one that is scheduled is a Q&A call, so that is going to be your spot to ask technical questions. All right, folks, we will see you next time. Until then, power on.